This is Let Your Voice Be Heard, right here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem.
Hey,
That's
what's
a
going
jam
on?
right there.
Is it?
Yeah.
Welcome back on Let Your Voice Be Heard on 90.3 FM, WHCR, the voice of Harlem. You know what you just tuned into? Let Your Voice Be Heard. You know what the name of the song was? Happy Now, but EDM. And we are here for an EDM Sunday where we talk about everything EDM. Jackie, you don't look excited.
That sounds awful.
I am playing music for the whites, Jackie, and you are not appreciative.
Not the whites.
He's actually playing music for Alyssa, who's been consistently requesting EDM music every show now.
Yes. And, you know, the interesting thing about this, though, is that most EDM actually grew out of black music because it comes from old school house. We had a whole conversation about that Friday night before you got here, Stanley.
Most pop music that white people create has come from black people in general, and EDM certainly, you know, electronic music in the United States.
Rock and roll came from jazz.
Exactly.
Gentrification came from Bed-Stuy.
And with that, welcome to Let Your Voice Be Heard right here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Happy to be back. Happy Sunday, guys. To our live listeners.
Sunday.
Yo, this is a weird December. Christmas is on a Tuesday.
Oh,
Yeah, I got the week off, so it's lit, but still.
nice. Yeah.
Who else has a
She's
week
like,
off?
I have the whole
Uh,
week off,
no.
so
I'm
I
going
don't.
to work like the day after Christmas.
I'm going to work on Christmas Eve, and I mean, I don't celebrate Christmas, and I could have taken off, and most people are going to be
She
taking
celebrates
off. But
Chinese food, okay?
yes, and movies.
I mean, yeah, so like, I don't actually care about or celebrate Christmas. I just like getting gifts during the month
Yeah,
and
it's
taking
nice.
time off. But like, no one is doing work. Why don't they just give you the week off?
I don't know. It is what it is.
Capitalism.
Whatever. Yeah.
The same reason
No.
why you like getting gifts.
Because capitalism, I mean, for like the kind of work that Jackie and I do, it's not capitalism. It's just because like I had to fight to get our week off. I've been fighting
Right.
for 6 months.
Yeah, but you have to work like every weekend
That's
too.
true.
So you know, it's
Speaking
a trade-off.
of, Stanley works hard, like, all the time and extremely. Speaking of Stanley, did you want to introduce yourself?
I guess I do, Selena.
No, he doesn't. He
Hello.
doesn't like us.
Hello, Facebook Live. Hello, IG Live. I see you, beautiful IG people. And, of course, hello to my podcast crew that is always listening. I appreciate you as well. This is Stanley Fritz. You can find me if you want to talk to me on Twitter at Stan Fritz. You can also find me on IG at Stan Fritz. I guess I use Snapchat sometimes. Not really.
What?
Snapchat.
You do?
I thought
What's
you
that?
quit Snapchat.
You said
Yeah.
you deleted it, Stanley.
I did, but I had to put it
Snapchat's
back.
over.
because
Didn't
Marilyn-
Riri tell you to get rid of it?
Marilyn still uses it, so sometimes I gotta go on
okay.
there.
That's what, you spying on her?
Pretty much, just to make sure she's okay, you know?
Okay.
And see what she's eating.
Ew.
And
I will not make a comment to
if
that
you wanna,
right now.
if you want to, see what's going on with me there, where I don't post anything, it's Dark Skin Swindle, the only place left where I still have my old Twitter handle that Selena made me delete, so I can have continuity all over the interwebs.
Very cool, very cool. Riri told you to delete it. Anyways, my name's Alyssa Fuchs, and you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Alyssa Fuchs. That's Alyssa with an I, ILYSSAFUCHS. Don't spell that wrong, or you might end up being cursing on Facebook. You can also find me on Twitter at Alyssa Fuchs, or on Instagram, Alyssa.Fuchs, because, I got to keep mixing it up a little bit. And of course, you could always leave a question or a comment on a politically preposterous fan page, but we rather that you leave questions or comments on the Facebook page for Let Your Voice Be Heard, and tune in via the live stream. And of course, call us at 212-650-6903.
Yeah,
Morning.
good morning, guys. This is Selena Hill, Instagram, Twitter, at Miss Selena Hill. Very happy to be here, as always. Happy that Jackie surprised us.
Yeah, it surprised you.
Surprised you, yeah.
Yeah, I was just like, hold on. Is this Jackie?
Yeah.
It's been a few weeks, but I'm happy to be here, guys. Of course, this is a show where we discuss politics, social issues, pop culture from a very diverse perspective. And of course, you guys can be included in the conversation. Leave a comment on our Facebook Live. That's facebook.com/Let Your Voice Be Heard. You can tweet us at BeHeard_radio. And if you want to call in, do so by calling up 212-650-6903.
69.
Oh, look at you not
Selena-
turning your mic
Hey,
on.
Do you remember when I got the number wrong and we accidentally gave out the number for a sex hotline?
Oh, yeah,
that was
that
pretty
was
funny.
several times.
That was really funny.
But hello, I'm happy to be here. I'm Jackie Cohen.
That's the sex hotline.
You can follow me on Twitter, at Jackie Cohen. That's JAQICOHEN. I'm very happy to be here. Very amused to surprise Selena.
Yes.
That was a great reaction to my arrival into the studio. So thank you for that. But yeah, excited to be here.
Nothing will ever top when Selena said, "At your wedding, I feel so proud that we were close enough for me to get an invitation."
Yeah.
Like, what is wrong with you?
It means so much to me that we're close enough friends that you invited me to your wedding.
I mean, that goes out in history as like one of the best toasts.
The best
ever.
toast made at my wedding. It was
Yes, I had the best toast.
You win.
Thank you, at Top Stanley. Yeah, so we have a great show lined up. We're going to be talking about outrage culture because apparently everyone is always upset about something. I mean, I went on Twitter this morning and everyone's really upset that Offset decided to surprise Cardi B and try to get her to take him back on stage.
No, that's stalking.
Like, he disrupted her entire performance, and she actually put out a video saying, you know, I don't want him to be bullied. There's millions of people dragging him right now, and you know, she said I don't think it's healthy because look what's happening with Pete Davidson. Like, she defended him, but then she also pivoted to Pete Davidson, who also has been talking about he's expressed some suicidal thoughts. So we're going to talk more about that and how social media has been used to amplify our outrage, and if that's always positive and progressive or if it's not. But before we get into that, we have a plethora of news stories that we're going to plethora.
Pleather is a fabric. Okay.
Thank you.
We got you.
I did. I tried it.
You're close.
I was close enough, right? Thank you. You guys knew what I was trying to say.
Very
So yeah, so there's a plethora of news stories that we're going to talk about. Trump has been tweeting about everything. Apparently Obamacare is going downhill and some other stuff that will probably make you outraged.
I can totally explain that once we get there. The whole Obamacare thing.
But if you're listening and you want to share a news story that you want us to talk about on air, you should leave us a comment on our Facebook Live or give us a phone call at 212-650-6903.
You know what's crazy? On the call on Thursday night, we had so many news stories, and we were like, man, if one or two things pop up between now and then, we'll just add it. And then like 47 things. Like, what's happening in the world right now?
It's just a constant news cycle. But anyways, on that note, I think we have to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to continue this conversation about the news. So stick with us, and we'll be back in just about a minute or two.
Yes. And again, guys, keep those tweets coming at BeHeard_radio. Keep those comments on our Facebook Live. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard.
What's going on, y'all? This is Let Your Voice Be Heard on 90.3 FM WHCR, the voice of Harlem.
Sponsored by Hennessy and Chicken Wings, apparently.
No, Hennessy and Champagne, beloved. Get your mixtures correct. This is Stanley Fritz. I'm here in the studio with Alyssa Fuchs, who loves champagne and chicken wings, or Hennessy and chicken wings?
Champagne and chicken wings.
That is ill. That's a nasty
No, I don't like them together.
Oh, okay. Just making sure.
Thanks for clarifying, Alyssa.
Yes, thank you, because you were going to lose your...
Champagne and chicken wings is a bad combination. I feel like that's a great combination.
You're both going to lose your I Have Black Friends affiliation card.
Why is that a bad combination?
Hennessy and champagne go together like Puff Daddy and Mace.
Really? Hennessy and champagne?
Yeah.
Really? I didn't know that.
But Hennessy and champagne will have you slumped.
Says the girl that doesn't drink.
Yeah, right? Sorry. But anyways, folks, as I get confused about Hennessy and champagne and all of its greatnesses, I want to tell you that I am Stanley Fritz. I'm in the studio with Selena Hill. And, of course, Alyssa Fuchs, who got the snapback painted forward this time like an undercover cop. And, of course, Jackie Cohen. Black people don't know what the Rangers are, Alyssa.
Yeah.
So, not true.
What are the Rangers, Selena?
A hockey team.
Where do they play?
New York.
Where in New York?
Madison Square Garden.
Okay, Queen.
Booyah.
See?
Name a player.
Selena's my new best friend today.
Okay, we're going to leave it right there. Let's leave it right there.
That's as far as most black people go, because like usually you go into the Knick game and the Ranger game is finishing, and all along people are like, hey, bro, watch out. Anyways, guys, we are not talking about the race wars that happened on 34th Street outside of Madison Square Garden between 7 and 9 p.m. when Cheddars had too many beers and Jay Sean smoked not enough weed. We are here to talk about the news stories that happened throughout this week, things that made you laugh, cry, curse, go on IG Live, go on Facebook Live, or listen on the podcast a day and a half late because maybe you had things to do over the weekend on a Sunday like sleep. And I want to start it off with one of my favorite moments of the week. And it's my favorite because it's not actually my favorite. It just really ticked me off. I don't know how many of you folks still watch and listen to Hot 97.
I do all the time.
Selena drives. Congratulations.
Yes, Selena drives.
This is like the only thing I listen to on the radio.
So Ebro of Ebro in the Morning was interviewing this young man by the name of Kodak Black. Kodak Black has multiple pending charges against him, including sexual assault. Ebro said to Kodak Black, hey, I know you have a pending charge, so we can't talk about it, but we do take sexual assault very seriously, and I hope that you can come back and we can have this conversation again. Then his co-host said, what do you think about moon landings? Kodak Black said both these questions are stupid as F, and then he said he doesn't like the way that they target people like him when they're going through something. Ebro said, are you upset? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, well, you can leave then. Kodak Black left. A lot of people have now been getting on Ebro saying that he tried to catch Kodak Black with a gotcha question and he was out of line. Go ahead.
Well, I'll say this because, like, again, and we're going to be speaking more extensively about outrage culture in a few more minutes, but the fact that people are so outraged, it honestly is concerning to me and alarming, because why in hip-hop culture are we still defending people who have alleged sexual assault charges or who have been convicted or indicted, people who have problematic behavior? Like, to me, we have to get to a point where I get, like, a fact if you're like, okay, I don't want to defend him, but at least let Ebro ask him a question about sexual assault. And the way Ebro asked the question, it was like such a roundabout question. He was just like, sexual assault is a big topic, and we're going to have to talk about it, but I know this case is legally pending and you don't want to go into detail. All Kodak Black had to say was like, yeah, I don't want to go into details, but I do understand how prevalent sexual assault is as an issue.
Right. He certainly could have asked the question in a more targeted, direct way, but I think he gave him an out that wasn't, I don't think that he did it in a way that was really trying to put him on the spot to say something that could incriminate himself or anything like that. But he did raise the issue, and I think that's really important. We ourselves host a show where often we've had people on our show where we've disagreed with them, and it can be very, very difficult to bring up topics or to ask questions that we know are going to get pushback or be controversial in the eyes of our guest, right? And I think that it's a challenging thing that as an interviewer in the media to hold the people that you're having on your show accountable for their actions and to talk about serious topics. And so I respect it. And I think it's unfortunate that he's getting so much pushback for it.
It's like that time I confronted the gay Republican who came on our show, and we told him that his accounting didn't make sense, and he called me a socialist and hung up on us.
I mean, look, here's the thing. Just from the legal perspective, I sort of agree with what you said, Selena, which was, it's not appropriate to ask somebody directly about some kind of pending charges they have, especially when anything that they say can and will be used against you. And that's not a joke. And if you talk about an open and pending criminal case, you could also waive your right to remain silent and waive your Fifth Amendment rights. So, in that sense, and that's not defending. That's just like from a lawyer perspective, I would always advise a client if they had open criminal charges and they were going on a radio show not to talk about anything related to their criminal case on a radio show or any media appearance. But from the bigger picture perspective, I think he could have just said something like, I don't condone sexual assault in any way,
right.
Without getting into the own details about his own case. But just I should also add, the way the law works is we don't make inferences by the fact that, your right to remain silent is unconditional. And we can't take an inference that you might be guilty just because you don't want to talk about something specifically related to your criminal case. Mm-hmm. So, that is where it sort of gets a little tricky in terms of the law. But speaking about tricky things in terms of the law, Michael Cohen's going to prison for 3 years.
Look at that.
Although I read this morning that he might not actually be, but I didn't read too much into that.
Well, I can explain that quickly, and
please.
I know you guys want to react to this. So right now he's been sentenced to 3 years. He did not get what's called a 5K1 letter, which is a letter from the government essentially stating that he provided substantial cooperation, which is what Mike Flynn got. Instead, he got sort of a recommendation from the government like, hey, you should be lenient. If he continues to cooperate and provides the government with a lot of additional information that would justify the government deciding to give him this 5K1 letter, ask for a downward departure, then they could go back to a judge and ask the judge to reduce that sentence from 3 years to something less.
But didn't the Mueller team also call Flynn a liar and said that he should have known better and really flame him during his court proceedings?
They did, but they also said that after he did come forward and he acted quickly, he gave them information, good information that they were able to corroborate, and he gave it to them fast. I mean, when it comes down to in cooperator situations, it's always about who flips first. Usually they're going to get the best deal because they're going to give Mueller or the prosecutor the information. Once Mueller has that information, if Michael Cohen wants to come forward and give that information and Mueller already has it, he's going to say okay, good, it's nice that you came clean, but we heard it from Flynn first, so he's going to get a better deal.
Right.
Gotcha.
Okay. So we don't think that this is the best deal, but do we think that this is a better deal than what he could have got? I mean, like, what does the length of the term say about what he knows?
I mean,
can we even say?
Yeah, it's hard to say because there's two competing cases. There's one in the Southern District. There's one in that Mueller's investigating. What we know is that he has provided some information, and that information has been helpful and justifies a lower sentence. But it does not appear that. I think the issue is one, timing. Some of the stuff they already knew, and two, he wanted to do it on his own terms. Mm-hmm. Normally, when you go meet with the government, you spill everything.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll say this. Yeah, Michael Cohen has 3 years. I know a lot of us are thinking or maybe questioning, does this mean we're one step closer to and possibly having an indictment on Trump or having him be, having some type of criminal charges be brought up against him in any way? I mean, some of us are hoping for impeachment here. Does that mean that necessarily?
I mean, it could, and that's where it gets tricky because there's a legal debate over whether or not a sitting president can be indicted. Some legal scholars say yes. Other legal scholars say the Constitution is clear that the method to remove a president for high crimes and misdemeanors, which essentially is felonies and misdemeanors, or crimes as we would call them, is impeachment. And then but impeachment is inherently a political process. So you get into a situation where if the House impeaches him, but they don't have enough votes in the Senate, then he doesn't get removed. Then that could be, in 2020, that could end up blowing up in Democrats' faces. He could end up getting reelected in the way that Bill Clinton did in 1996. Or it could go the other way. At some point, Republicans may see the writing on the wall, and they may go to the White House and do what they did to Nixon and say, resign, because if not, we're going to remove you.
So that's really interesting, right? Like, I think what's important to remember is that Trump still has a huge base. There are still people who are solidly behind him. And similarly to Nixon, Nixon wasn't as unpopular for a long time, right? Like he too had tremendous support, and many incidents sort of led up to his eventual resignation, right? And many other people sort of fell leading up to his eventual leaving of office. And I think that the same sort of needs to happen, the same sort of cultural shift, and the same way that the party sort of forced Nixon out needs to happen with Trump for him to finally, leave office, if that is to happen at all.
I don't think he's getting in trouble.
No, I don't.
I just hope they damage him enough so he can lose a second term election.
Yeah, that would be best case scenario too for me as well.
But let's get back to the messiness, guys. I want to talk about some other stuff. So Centoya Brown, the young woman who's been a victim of sex trafficking, and who killed one of her Johns when she was a teen and got sentenced to life in prison, tried to had the case amended and hopefully get out earlier, and the judge said that she needs to be in jail for 51 years before she can qualify for parole.
So my question is, she's still a teenager now. Was she being charged? No, she's no longer a teenager.
She was incarcerated when she was 16. It's been 15 years.
Wow.
Right. She's been in.
So she was charged as an adult.
Yeah.
Wait, even though it happened when she was a teenager.
How old is she now?
Probably about 30 31.
Something.
Oh my God.
It's... sorry, listen. There's a couple things we should know about Centoya that she doesn't have the full brain functions of an adult. So she's a person with with some mental issues. And she's just not. This is not the right way to approach someone like that. This is somebody that we should be looking to support. And it wouldn't make sense to put them in jail for life.
Right. It boils down to this is a person who was sex trafficked, who had no control or agency over her body, who killed somebody who was using her body, and is sentenced to an over 50-year sentence now before she is even eligible to seek any kind of parole, right?
Right. I mean, look, this is it's a travesty of justice from the beginning. Obviously, she put on a self-defense at trial, and she lost. And she may have won if this was not in Tennessee. And remember, when you go to trial and you put on a case, the makeup of the jury matters, the location where you are matters, the jurisdiction matters. I assume, and I don't know for sure, that it was probably a majority white jury if it was not an all-white jury. Things are very different depending on where you're charged with a crime. We don't have uniform laws. Things in New York State that, in New York State, she maybe wouldn't have been convicted, or maybe if she was, she would have been eligible for release sooner. I mean, just so, there's so many different factors coming into play here. There raises another interesting legal question about whether she'll take a federal appeal to try and make the argument, from the bigger picture perspective, that the sentencing scheme or the laws in Tennessee are unconstitutional. They violate the federal constitution. From what I understand, no decision has been made yet about whether or not there will be an appeal. So I guess Rachel Maddow would say, watch this space.
Yeah,
the governor is currently considering which word?
Clemency.
Clemency. Thank you very much,
Okay.
Alyssa, for
Yeah,
her.
well, I think appropriate. I know we're going to go to break, but really quickly, I wanted to just bring up another young girl of color who has suffered tremendously. The 7-year-old young migrant girl who was crossing the border. Apparently, she was detained by U.S. Customs and she died in custody. And now the U.S. is saying that it was because during her hike from South America, or I think it was Mexico, she didn't have like enough water and she was dehydrated and that's what happened. But her father was saying, no, that's not what happened. She was drinking plenty of water and something went drastically wrong during the 8 hours that she was in U.S. custody. And apparently, I think the father had signed some type of form or like contract agreeing to what the U.S. was saying. But now it turns out that not only does he not speak English, like Spanish is his second language, he speaks an indigenous language. So there was clear confusion. So this case is also very messy and someone has died.
And Stephen Miller is on CNN this morning shouting
yes.
at people saying that it's because of liberal judges that the 7-year-old is dead. Just one more quick aside to how trash the Trump administration is. The Trump administration put out a notice saying that they were looking for people who have gotten their immigration status recently to adopt some of these children they separated from their families. 170 families volunteered, and when they came forward for interviews, ICE came and arrested them to have them deported.
Horrible. Horrible.
This is your king.
And it comes on the backs of the news that the Trump administration is now looking to deport Vietnamese refugees that came here during the Vietnam era, as refugees from the war, that we started. And these people were given guarantees and assurances by the U.S. government for the past 30 years that they would be able to stay here in this country and, in fact, given special status to stay in this country and now are facing deportation as well. So if the theme is the Trump administration is trash, I'm all for that being today's theme.
And if you're not depressed enough already, don't worry. We're going to go on a break, but we're going to come back and we're going to talk about some of the other news stories and things that just basically have us all outraged. And how progressive and healthy is that? Just let your voice be heard.
Dejanay, I know you know who's in the internays, so thank you. I want to throw to Selena before she stabs me now. Go ahead,
Hey, thanks for that intro and getting us pumped up to Alyssa's favorite genre of music now. So guys, if you are upset, I'm not surprised. I think we're all pretty upset.
I'm outraged.
Are you really? So it seems like the internet is always angry about something, from Ebro questioning Kodak Black about his sexual assault charges, which we just talked about during the news roundup, to Kevin Hart's 2011 homophobic tweets, to the apparently rapey lyrics of Baby It's Cold Outside. I mean, take a second listen, and they are pretty creepy. To PETA's anti-animal language campaign. So no longer can we say, or at least they're asking us to no longer say, like, you can't kill two birds with a stone. Rather, we should feed two birds with a stone, right? So I say this to say, but we live in a very polarizing time, and often enough, we all express our grievances on social media about the people, the places, and the things that upset us. But has our outrage gone too far? I mean, just think about it. It's Christmas time, and while most of us think of Christmas, it evokes childhood memories, peace, tradition, celebration. But when CBS recently aired the classic Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, social media went nuts. They were saying that how inappropriate is Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer when it is promoting bullying. It's promoting a lack of tolerance. We should not be teaching our children this. I am not kidding. This is what happened. And then Baby It's Cold Outside, that song, which was written, I think, 1964, and won an Academy Award, it's banned from radio stations in 2018. I mean, forget the explicit lyrics of rap music and rock music. They're banning Baby It's Cold Outside because people are saying it's rapey. I mean, if you actually look at and read the lyrics, the woman in the song does say, what's in this drink? And then the man is pleading with her, baby, it's cold outside, just stay here. He grabs her knee. It is a little creepy. So, I mean, people have called for it to be banned, and now it is. And, on top of that, there was huge outrage over Kevin Hart And now this story is a little different, but again, it plays into the theme of outrage culture. So he was supposed to host the 2019 Academy Awards, and it turns out that the tweets that he made between the years 2009 and 2011, they were homophobic, and people were like, he should not be able to host the Academy Awards because of these tweets. And he said, at first, initially, he said, you know what, I'm not going to apologize. I've addressed these issues in the past. I've evolved as a man. I'm almost 40 years old, and I've moved on in life. But people weren't having that, and he had to step down from the gig, and then they did put out an official apology in 2011, on Twitter. But again, it begs the question of, are we just so outraged that we don't give people space enough to evolve? Are we just ready to cancel everybody? Or are we, saying this is what consciousness, this is what it means to be woke in 2018, and people, songs, music, and art should evolve just like our culture has evolved, right? So maybe we're just raising our standards. That's a discussion that we're going to have here on Let Your Voice Be Heard. And of course, we want you to be a part of this. Leave those comments on our Facebook Live. We want to know what you think about outrage culture. Are we being too politically correct? That's what we mean when we say PC culture. And of course, you can call in at
212-650-6903.
So I'll open up with reactions. I mean, Jackie, there's a lot. Stanley, Alyssa, there's a lot going on. I mean, who wants to jump in with a first reaction?
Yeah, so are we reacting to Kevin Hart in general
all
or
of
just
it,
all of it?
Anything. Well, what piqued your interest most?
The Kevin Hart thing really interests me. And I think, it's hard to say. If I don't like this idea of, you can't say anything anymore. Everything's too PC. Because that's something that you always hear just, old out of touch people say, right? So I don't really buy into that, you just can't make these jokes anymore. Nothing you can say is, these kids these days. I always think that's sort of a washed argument, and I don't really buy into it. But I will say, there is, Kevin Hart, what's so interesting about it is he made these tweets, right, between 2009 to 2011. And he said, I have since apologized. I've grown. I acknowledge how problematic those tweets are. It's hard for me to say, I'm not gay, and I wasn't. I mean, I would be offended by those tweets if I saw anybody tweet them. But I think about a prominent figure in pop culture like Mel Gibson, for example, who is a known anti-Semite. If I heard that he was hosting the Oscars, I would be enraged, right? Completely. Although Mel Gibson, I don't know that he's ever apologized for any of the comments that he said. And we've started to see him sort of reemerge. There was a while where he was sort of canceled by the masses, and since then has sort of started to reemerge in the past couple of years.
So, I mean, I am gay,
yeah,
so
right.
That's why I wanted to jump in there. I mean, look, this is one of those things where I think there's a difference between somebody like Mel Gibson, who's an outspoken anti-Semite, doesn't apologize for it, in fact, probably doubles down on it, and somebody who maybe has made some problematic comments in the past, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and has come around and become more woke and evolved, and is now being, and is no longer in that place and has apologized for it. Now, yeah, we can say if you say homophobic things, then you're homophobic. That may be true, but the question becomes, if you've said homophobic things in the past, or anti-women things, or sexist things, or whatever, but you've become more woke, at some point, then, we have to say, okay, maybe, yes, we can recognize that what you said in the past is problematic, but we're not going to give you a pass on it. We're going to thank you for evolving versus, and it's a hard line because there are people that have said racist things that, still say racist things and are still racist now. And you're like, well, where do you draw that line? And I think the line, at least for me, when it comes to homophobia, comes at, how long ago was it? Mm-hmm. What have you done since then? If Kevin Hart is out there helping out LGBT people and donating money to LGBT causes and apologizing for these comments, then I'm not going to give him a pass, but I'm going to say, look, I'm not also going to get all my panties in a bunch over something he said 10 years ago.
Oh, that's problematic language right there, Alyssa. So a couple of things. I want to talk about when people say they feel you can't say anything anymore. And I'm not talking for the people that drag the knuckles and have sex with their cousins in the Trump administration. I'm actually talking about just regular folks. I know plenty of people who feel like that. Even I felt like that sometimes. And I want to kind of put some clarity to that feeling of things are changing fast. So something that was okay yesterday, sometimes it feels like it's not okay today. I think a good example of that is I was on Twitter, and then someone was like, and I said I was straight, and then like I got dragged on Twitter
Stop it,
for
Stanley.
not saying I was a cis male. I had never heard of cis before, so then I was like, what am I supposed to say then?
Right. So I think that's a really interesting thing that you bring up, and I think that you, Stanley, as someone who's very, you have a huge social media presence.
Yeah.
I find that you'll write things that are like, if you think this way, you're canceled. Like if you think this way, unfollow me. I don't want to know you. I don't want to talk to you ever again. Which is like interesting because I don't think you're wrong, but that's not how you talk about politics and sort of social issues one-on-one, right? Like you're someone who has a very nuanced point of view and can sort of elaborate on these things in a more nuanced way. And I think that what we're seeing is a little bit of an unwillingness to engage, and there's no space on the internet to have a nuanced conversation or to sort of seek that kind of understanding on the one hand. On the other hand, you do have people who are like, I just don't understand. I don't understand, why it's wrong to say that. Yeah. And it can be extremely exhausting for people to constantly have to just be out there educating ignorant folks instead of just living their lives. So I think it goes sort of both ways.
It does. And guys, if you want to chime into this conversation, again, the number is 212-650-6903. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of different things that we can talk about here because, I mean, I get it. Like Jackie was saying, there is no nuance on the internet. To me, everything is very polarizing. It's black and it's white, but it's like how should we embrace or, certain type of things like Baby It's Cold Outside or like even Next Too Close, like these different songs like art and music, which were created years ago, but now not necessarily aren't something that we would say is something that's progressive or positive or becoming.
Look, things just haven't aged well. And I think that there's an acknowledgement that we can say like, okay, maybe something hasn't aged well. And it's not that it's something that at the time was not considered to be problematic, but is considered problematic now. That should be the jumping off point to have a conversation that is nuanced like we are having today. But, going back to your initial point, Jackie, which is, because there's really no nuance on the internet, it's really hard for people to do that. So instead they just, yell at each other back and forth, curse each other out. I mean, I saw a take this week on Baby It's Cold Outside that says it's actually a very empowering feminist song where she, I don't know about that personally, but I also think that when it comes to stuff from the past, we don't need to give it a pass, but we should also recognize that, this is something that came out at a time where these problematic things were not considered problematic. I mean, like you've seen the show Mad Men. People used to walk around and smack girls' asses in the office and say things that were inappropriate, and that would completely be considered sexual harassment today. Now, that's not saying in the past that was okay. What it's saying is like we have to acknowledge that culture has changed and have a conversation about it.
Yeah, and I know we also want to go to a break. I'll say this. When I actually love the song Baby It's Cold Outside, and when I started reading the articles and the analysis of it, I'm like, yeah, I get how the song is very creepy, but to me, I'm on the side where I say let a classic song be a classic. Like, I don't think it should be banned. I think music and pop culture is way more explicit now, and so I don't know.
Fair.
Yeah, so I mean, on that note, I know we do have to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation again. Is outrage culture just too outrageous? This is Let Your Voice Be Heard.
Baby, it's cold outside.
I've got to go away.
Baby, it's cold outside.
This evening has been
Hoping that you
WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
They're just like
my
ice.
mother will start to worry.
Beautiful, what's your
My
hurry?
father will be pacing the floor.
Listen to the fireplace.
I mean, have you heard some of the lyrics in some of the songs that are out these days?
Yeah, I'm offended.
You ever heard Let Me Smell Your
Anyway.
Let me see you do
Classic.
the round.
Another classic.
Another classic.
Yeah, so we're back. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. My name is Selena Hill. I'm here with Jackie Cohen, Alyssa Fuchs, and Stanley Fritz. And we're talking about PC culture and these culture wars. I mean, we've talked about Baby It's Cold Outside and how, again, this song is banned from certain radio stations because people are saying that, it promotes rape. And I know Jackie had some closing comments on that before we move on to other issues and people who are problematic and have been canceled.
Yeah, I think so. You both made the point, Alyssa and Selena, that things haven't aged well. But I think it's important to remember that even though these are things that haven't aged well, that's a good thing, right? That's society sort of reflecting that these are no longer values. But I think it's important to remember, especially all the people that are calling for Kevin Hart to be canceled, that these are things that were at one point very much part of the pop culture, right?
Yeah.
Very much acceptable, very much things that maybe you even liked, right? And I think it's important for us to be a little bit self-critical and self-aware as we're calling out other people as to our own sort of misgivings and things that we used to like that were problematic. So an example was Alyssa and I had this conversation about the movie 16 Candles, right? Which is sort of seen as a classic and something that many, many teenagers grow up since the 1980s loving this movie. And I certainly did. And I think everybody I knew loves it.
It's literally a cult classic.
It's a complete teenage classic, right? There is a line in the movie, or there's a sort of side story in the movie where the nerd character, the Anthony Michael Hall character in the movie, rapes somebody after a party, right? He takes advantage of a drunk popular girl who falls asleep, and there's a line in it where they talk about how, they had sex and she wasn't aware, and she was like, did I like it? And he says, yeah, I think you did, right? This is rape, and this is so problematic, and we watched this video of an attorney watching this and saying, oh, absolutely that would be illegal if you were looking at it under the the rule of the law. But these are things that we need to sort of like broaden out our vision and understand that these are things that we all sort of liked and maybe weren't paying super close attention to, and sort of reanalyze all the things that we've incorporated into our cultural understanding.
Yeah, no, that being said, I actually wanted to switch gears a little bit and sort of go back to what happened with Kevin Hart, because a lot of people, especially high-profile, prominent black comedians, rushed to his defense. I'm talking Nick Cannon, D.L. Hughley, a number of others, and they were saying, hey, guys, remember, he's a comedian. And they brought up the point that comedians do have creative license to be offensive. And then, thinking of that, I'm like, okay, yeah, no, I get that. But on the same token, it was just last year when Bill Maher used the N-word on his show. To me, it was very inappropriate. And at that point, I canceled Bill Maher. So it's like, Stanley, are we being, or, am I being hypocritical where I'm like, look, Kevin Hart has evolved. He deserves a pass. But Bill Maher should be canceled. Where do you stand on comedians having creative license to be offensive?
I think it's very simple with comedians. If it's not funny, don't laugh.
Exactly.
Right.
Period.
Exactly.
I remember I had a debate with one of my former colleagues from NIPERG a couple years ago about Daniel Tosh making rape jokes. And I was like, oh, no, it's funny. And Daniel Tosh made a rape joke, and the woman said, that's not funny. And then he said to some guys there, he said, wouldn't it be funny if those guys raped that woman right there? And everyone started laughing.
That's wild. There's a great comedian, Cameron Esposito, who's a great queer comedian who has a whole set about this idea of rape jokes, and she really calls out a lot of male comics who made them, and she has a great line in it that's like, I am a very funny, successful comedian, and I've never made a rape joke, and if you can't do comedy without doing that, you're just bad at your job. You're just not funny.
Well, I also, you have to recognize there's a difference between just being offensive for the purpose of being offensive, or saying problematic things like Bill Maher saying the N-word, or making a rape joke, and saying things that are sort of racy in a way. And I don't mean racist, I mean racy. And people finding them funny and having more look, I'm sorry, I don't want to go to a comedy show that's just like dry comedy, that's like a bunch of dad jokes. That's not the kind of comedy I like. I like comedy that can be, I don't want to say problematic,
subversive,
but somewhat a little bit maybe a little bit offensive, maybe a little bit dirty. I mean, one of my favorite comedians, subversive, is Lisa Lampanelli, who literally does a whole comedy act about sex and her having sex and other stuff around it. I mean, it's dirty and offensive, but it's not offensive like Bill Maher saying the N-word offensive. So, there's sort of a difference between, different types of things when it comes to comedy, but I do think we have to let art flourish. We can't just censor all art, and we have to be very careful about where we draw that line as to what's problematic and what's not.
So I used to like Lisa Lampanelli. I don't like her anymore because I don't appreciate the way that she fetishizes black men and tries to make it seem like I think she says some problematic things. I know some people find it funny. I don't listen to her. So that's that. And I just want to go back on Bill Maher for a second and just be very clear that he's a trash white person, period, and no one should support him. Not just because he makes racist jokes and he thinks because he has sex with black women he can make those jokes, but because before any of that, he was on his show consistently saying that Islam is a savage religion and that those people don't deserve mercy. Yeah. So Bill Maher does not deserve your support.
Well, speaking of the Bill Maher situation, that's something that was amplified a year ago by Black Twitter. Stanley, you happen to be a CAD card-carrying member of Black Twitter. And, just to push back a little bit, like, I get your point there, but Black Twitter also made a huge stink about Drake because 10 years ago he was doing some type of performance art where he had blackface on. And then so you see, sometimes it seems like Black Twitter just taking things and in my opinion, they're taking things a little too far.
I think you're talking about quote unquote Black Twitter as if it's a monolith. When even within that quote unquote culture of Black Twitter, there's like several different subcultures and subgroups. So maybe there was some folks who were upset by that, but like a lot of people didn't really care. At least the folks that I follow. If you look hard enough, you will find somebody who's outraged about something. There was a guy. Everyone who's on Twitter and like is a person of color and knows about Greek life knows about the white Kappa who can shimmy.
Yes.
And there would always be videos of him shimmying. He wrote an article saying how like corporations have monetized woke culture, and they got mad at him for writing that. I thought that was dumb. Jack?
So you didn't agree there?
No. So like it's nuance. It's never the same.
Yeah.
Here's the deal. I think it's really easy to get angry at one person, and we're always as communities seeking a scapegoat, right? We just want one person to blame for all of our wrongs, right? So Kevin Hart is one of the most famous comedians in the country, one of the most, well-paid comedians in the country. He made these tweets in 2009, between 2009 to 2011, and his fame has soared since then, right? He's one of the most famous comedians in the country. I think that our outrage at him is really our outrage at us, right? Like, we're not mad about this one song that seems rapey and inappropriate. We're mad at ourselves for decades, for over 50 years, thinking that song was romantic and cute when we realize that the content of it is actually really inappropriate, right? And so I think it's a lot harder to hold ourselves accountable for this stuff. But you have to remember that, like, these are jokes. Bill Maher has a huge audience, right?
Yeah.
It's not, he is one person, right? And he has, a big production on his show, but there are millions of people that tune in every week to his work for years, right? He's been accused of this kind of stuff since the 90s, and people still tune in. And so it's problematic that he has this platform and he's saying these things, but there are so many more people who enable that because they agree, they feel the same way he does. They laugh at his jokes that are inappropriate,
right? And
so but it's harder to hold those people, those sort of anonymous faces, accountable for what he's doing.
Well, they do get held accountable because of social media. And as soon as someone says anything, no matter how problematic it is, they get called out. That's why it's called outrage culture. There's not a lot of people who get passes for stuff nowadays because the internet does exist and it gives people platforms to speak up.
Can I just jump off real quick? I know I'm going to sound like radical silly, but white people consistently get passes. White people get all the passes.
True.
White people do stuff, wildly racist stuff, cry about it, go away for 6 months, do a spread for whatever magazine, and they're good money again. Mm-hmm. The reason that so many people got mad about Kevin Hart's comments is because Amy Schumer says wild, problematic, homophobic, racist stuff all the time. Yeah. Lena Dunham has apologized at least 15 times in the last year and a half, especially recently, about lying on someone who was raped and spoke up about it. White people get all the passes.
No, you're absolutely right about that. Look, that's just like in society, that's the case also. So, obviously it's something we've been working on trying to change, but it's no different than anything else, which I think also comes back to the point in the whole segment. Yes, we don't, I think all of us could say we don't want to live in a society where everything is so politically correct all the time that anything you say, even if you're like, the snow that's falling from the sky is white today, people are like, oh, that's racist, but at the same time, where's the line? I don't know. And I do think in some respects that some things have gone too far and that some people have been canceled for things that are less than problematic or...
Agreed.
So that being said, Alyssa, we're closing things out here. In 30 seconds, final thoughts. Are we being over-policed or is this consciousness in 2018, Alyssa?
I don't know. I don't think there's a one answer to that. I don't think it's a mutually exclusive thing. I think in certain respects we are being over-policed and we're over-policing ourselves, and some of that is good when we are calling out things that are actually problematic, but sometimes I think, like I said, it does go too far. People are calling out things that are not necessarily problematic. They're overly sensitive, and I don't think it helps us in society to be that overly sensitive. At some point you got to be a little tough about certain things, and you got to figure out what's worth being outraged over and what's not worth being outraged over, because at the end of the day, it's like the boy who cried wolf. If you're constantly outraged over everything, when something pops up that actually is outrageous, that you need to be outrageous, and you start crying wolf, nobody's coming to rescue you because you've been crying wolf so long.
Well said. Jackie, we're closing things out.
Yeah, so I think that I definitely think there should be more space for nuance, and certainly in our conversations on the internet. But I think that, to my point earlier, we're sort of collectively focusing our outrage in the wrong places, right? We're so angry at people like Kevin Hart, which maybe rightfully so, but we're not as angry at the Academy Awards themselves. And the Academy, which is known to be sort of a racist, homophobic institution, and they have a lot more power because they're in control of the images and the pop culture that we experience on a day-to-day basis, and sort of put out the reflection that we see and sort of normalize within ourselves. So I think that we need to ask ourselves, who are we holding accountable? Are they the right people? And do we believe that sort of rehabilitation of past errors are possible? It's something that we should reflect on.
Stanley, last comments, and the question I want to throw at you, and you have just a few seconds to answer, is, to Jackie's point, are we willing to forgive people for past grievances, or are we come to a place as a society where it's just cancel culture and you'll get canceled for anything that you say today or may have said years ago?
We have to be willing to forgive people, and people have to be willing to apologize and be held accountable. I think that cancel culture, a lot of it is just hive mentality. People aren't even really mad. I've gotten sucked up into it. I remember I was quote unquote outraged about the show Blackish because of the name Blackish.
Right.
And then I loved the show, and I was like, then it didn't matter anymore.
Yep.
So we should be clear about that. And also, like as Jackie said, we're going at the individuals when it's not the individuals. All of us have been pretty much poisoned by a system that's inherently racist and sexist, and we're reacting to it. And we have to we have to attack that for serious.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're right. Why not be more upset about the institutions that are systematically racist, homophobic, and non-inclusive? I mean, people are very upset about the song "People It's Cold Outside," but how upset are we that people are actually outside and cold and homeless? And I'll say this. Okay. Last class.
No, that's a meme that's been going around, though.
Yeah, seriously. And I just want to say this. Whom you listen to, what art you consume, who you praise publicly, these are all public outward signals about your own values and morals. So I get it. Pick and choose what it is that you want to make, that you want to protest, that you want to speak about, but also take a look and say, you know what? Society is reflective of who we are. And it was just a couple years ago when people were saying wildly homophobic things and wildly racist things, and they got away with it.
They still are.
They still are, right?
And they still do. So on that note, we're going to close out. I want to just thank everyone who tuned in and chimed into the show today. Again, if you want to continue your support of Let Your Voice Be Heard, please give us a small donation or a big donation on Patreon. That's patreon.com/BeHeardRadio. And again, we'll see you next Sunday, God willing. Thank you.
It may not be so cold anymore.
Bye.